Okay, quiz time. I'm gonna draw something. I have some paper and a pen, and I'm going to draw something here. And I want you to just answer to yourself what you see. So this, I guess it's kind of like one of those, what do they call it? The Rorschach test, I think, where the ink blots and you kind of hold it up and see, well, what do I see? All right. Are you ready? Oh, this is a tough one. All right, here we go. Say to yourself, well, this is what I see. What do I see here? Okay. Okay, now, if you said that I see a dot on the piece of paper, raise your hand, right? I see a black dot. I see it as well. So, let me ask you the question, though. Did you say that I see a white piece of paper? Or did you just notice the dot? Interesting. I want you to think about that for just a second. Was the first thing that you saw the dot and registered and focused on and didn't even really register in your mind that there's a white, clean piece of paper everywhere else except for that one spot? So, interesting. Why do you think that is? You know, it's interesting to me because our brains are really wired for negativity. It's simply the way they are. Our brains are wired to see negativity. We are wired to see the dark spot instead of the white paper. Now, I love this object lesson. This is actually an object lesson my daughter showed to me, and she grabbed it, I think, off of a YouTube video, or somebody had commented on something, and it really spoke to her. So she shared it with me, and I thought I would like to share it too. So I can't take credit for this one. But it's an interesting topic, and it goes along with some things that I've been studying and working on for a while about how our brains are wired for negativity. I have some really good mentors and friends that I've discussed this with and learned a lot from. And when we understand that biologically our brains are designed to see the dark spot, to see negative first, and I'll explain that a little bit more in just a second, it actually can help us rewire our brains, right? That neuroplasticity, if you're not familiar with that term, I highly recommend that you look it up. It's the ability for our brains to change. The actual neurons, the pathways that we have created can change. We can learn new pathways. We can change the way we think. And that's what I call awareness. As we gain new awarenesses, literally our brains change. And that's pretty awesome. So you can kind of look at this as from an evolutionary standpoint. You know, I use the term evolution lightly. I do think we evolve as we grow. Now, I don't believe that we evolved from apes or some other organism. I definitely don't believe in that. But I do believe that we evolve as we grow. I believe that we are different now than we were 500-600 years ago as a species. So, but that ability to see the negative actually was a protective mechanism that our brains used. You know, when we lived in a much more dangerous environment, when nature around us was much more dangerous, you know, if we walked outside and let's say you walk up to a rock and you see, this is the extent of my artistic skills here, and you see spider on that rock, and let's say it's a black widow or something nasty like that, you're going to see that and you're going to notice that and your brain's going to register that because there's a threat there. It's danger, right? But what we may not see is, again, don't pick on my artistic skills, is the flower, yes, that's a flower, is the flower or the field of flowers that are surrounding that rock. You know, maybe it's a very rare flower or a flower that has medicinal benefits or something. Now, maybe we'd see that a little bit more, but our brains are wired to see that little fella right there, that spider, because it was dangerous, right? So we're wired to see this negativity. Now, We live in a very different world now, where that's not something that we really need to worry about all that much. We live in a very comfortable world. Now, again, I understand that there are people around the world who live in different levels of we're going to use the word comfort or discomfort, but our world as a whole is much more advanced than we were 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago. That poverty level is really, really rising. So, but what's not happening is our brains aren't really moving along with it. We're still wired for this negativity. So what do? Think about it. When you interact with your friends, when you interact with people, you walk down the street, you hear people talking. Most of the time, what do you hear them talking about? They're usually complaining. You get together as a group and people tend to sit around, oh my goodness, my day was so hard today, or can you believe what happened here, or that one client is doing this, or the computer, whatever software that we're using isn't working. It's usually a complaint, right? It's that kind of negativity. Or when life gets hard, when God sends us some trial, that's what we see. We see the trial because it's hard and it's negative. And if we can train our brains to step back out away from that and actually see the positive perspective, God says that we're here to have joy, right? That we are here to be happy, to learn. And I mean, how many stories do we have in the scriptures of people being thrown in prison and, beaten, whatever, you name it, from Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon, all Doctrine and Covenants is full of it. We have all these stories of prophets and whatnot who really went through a lot of stuff. And how many times did they tell us that they found joy in their afflictions? Paul is really good at that. Talks about it all the time. He found joy in his afflictions because he was able to see things from a different light. When we can step back and see things more from the way that God sees things. Now, we can't see everything, of course, the way he sees things. He's just much more than we are. I'll just put it that way. His ways are not our ways. But when we can learn to start moving down that direction and take a step back and see, okay, wait a minute. Look at this through an eternal lens. How is this moment, this hardship that I'm going through, going to help me eternally in my eternal progression? How am I learning in this moment to be more like Christ? How am I learning to shed that ego, stop worrying about myself, and start getting outside myself and seeing how can I grow and how can I learn and how can I help others? So taking that spider friend and still seeing it. I mean, obviously a black widow is not something you want to toy with. Still seeing it, but not making that the focus of our concentration. We can actually branch out and start seeing the flowers, the sunshine, whatever else it is. So I want you to think about that, and I want to challenge you to really try to change the way you think. This week, take, some time each morning and think about it. Try to ponder about it as you get up each morning. Make yourself goals. Dedicate yourself to change the way you think. Now, it's hard. What may be easier is to try to change the way you speak first, because sometimes it's hard to change our way our brains work right off. But if you can just make a goal, I'm not going to talk about this negative thing. I may be still thinking this is a rough day or complaining about whatever, but if I can just make that goal and not talk about it, that's one step. And as we get better at that, then we can start actually saying, let me see how this hard day is helping me. Maybe it's helping me become more humble or more forgiving, or whatever it may be that draws us closer to him and makes us more like him. I promise as you practice this, you will find amazing changes in your life. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. I struggle with it myself still. But life really does change. And all of a sudden you find yourself waking up happier, more excited for the day as you start to see things through that eternal lens. So stop focusing here. Start focusing here. See the rest of the paper, not just that little black dot. All right. Thanks for being with me. I love you all.